I was sitting in my home office on a Tuesday morning when I noticed Patricia from the HOA standing on my driveway, staring intently at the bare concrete where everyone else on the street still had 3 inches of packed snow. It was February in Boulder, Colorado, and we had just gotten hammered with another winter storm overnight. My driveway and the walkway leading to my front door were completely clear and dry, while my neighbors were out there with shovels, salt spreaders, and prayers. My name is Keith Nordstrom, and I am a mechanical engineer who works from home designing HVAC systems for commercial buildings. When I bought this house in the Maple Ridge subdivision 3 years ago, one of the first projects I tackled was installing a hydronic snow melting system under my driveway and front walkway. It was not cheap. The system cost me nearly $40,000 between the materials, the excavation work, and the careful installation of the tubing network that carried heated glycol solution beneath the concrete. But living in Colorado, where winter can dump snow on you from October through May, it was worth every penny to never have to shovel again. I watched Patricia through my window as she pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my dry driveway. She was wearing one of those puffy white coats that made her look like a marshmallow, and her blonde hair was pulled back so tight I wondered if it gave her a headache. Patricia Henderson was the president of the Maple Ridge HOA, and she had made it her personal mission to involve herself in every aspect of every homeowner's life in our subdivision. My phone rang 5 minutes later. I looked at the caller ID and saw it was the HOA office number. I considered not answering, but I knew Patricia would just keep calling or show up at my door. "Hello, Keith. This is Patricia Henderson from the Maple Ridge HOA. I am standing outside your home and I need to discuss something with you immediately." "I can see you from my window, Patricia." "What's going on?" "I need you to come outside. This is official HOA business." I sighed, saved my work, and grabbed my jacket. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a slap, but my walkway was perfectly dry under my feet. I could see my neighbor Tom across the street struggling with an ice scraper on his driveway, his breath coming out in white puffs. Patricia was standing with her arms crossed, her phone held up like she was gathering evidence at a crime scene. "Keith, I have been receiving complaints from multiple residents about your driveway." "Complaints? About what?" "About the fact that your driveway is completely clear while everyone else is struggling with snow removal. Several residents have pointed out that this creates an unfair situation and puts undue burden on the rest of the community." I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "Patricia, I installed a snow melting system with my own money, on my own property. How is that unfair to anyone?" "It creates disparity within the community. Maple Ridge is supposed to be a unified neighborhood where everyone contributes equally to maintaining our properties. Your system undermines that principle." "I am maintaining my property. Very well, actually. You should be thanking me because I am not leaving snow and ice on my driveway that could melt and refreeze and cause safety issues." Patricia's face tightened. "That is not the point. The point is that you have an advantage that other residents do not have, and it is causing resentment." I have been contacted by no fewer than 7 homeowners who feel that if you have this system, it should be available to the entire community. Available to the entire community. "Patricia, this cost me $40,000 to install." "Are you suggesting I should have paid to install snow melting under everyone's driveways?" "I am suggesting that resources within our community should be shared equitably. We are going to be holding an emergency HOA board meeting this Thursday evening at 7, and your attendance is mandatory. We will be discussing how to address this situation in a way that is fair to all residents. You cannot make my attendance mandatory, Patricia, and you certainly cannot tell me what to do with a system I paid for and installed on my own property." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made my stomach drop. "Actually, if you review Section 12, Paragraph 4 of your HOA agreement, you will see that homeowners can be required to attend meetings when matters of community welfare are being discussed. Your snow melting system has become a community welfare issue. See you Thursday, Keith." She turned and walked away, her boots crunching through the snow on the street. I stood there on my perfectly dry driveway, feeling my blood pressure rising. That evening, I dug out my HOA agreement and read through the entire thing. It was 73 pages of legal jargon that I had admittedly only skimmed when I bought the house. Most of it was standard stuff about maintaining your lawn, not painting your house weird colors, and keeping your trash cans out of sight. But buried in Section 12 was the paragraph Patricia had referenced. It stated that homeowners could be requested to attend meetings regarding community matters, though I noted it said requested, not required. The language was vague enough that I knew Patricia would interpret it however suited her purposes. I called my friend Marcus, who was a real estate attorney. We had gone to college together at CU Boulder, and he had helped me review the purchase agreement when I bought the house. "Marcus, I need your opinion on something HOA related." "Oh no, what did Patricia do now?" "How do you know it is about Patricia?" "Because every HOA horror story in Maple Ridge involves Patricia Henderson." "What is it this time?" I explained the situation to him, including the emergency meeting demand. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Okay, so here is the thing. Your HOA agreement does not give them any authority over systems you install inside your property boundaries as long as they meet building codes and do not create hazards for neighbors. Your snow melting system is completely legal, and you got the proper permits when you installed it, right?" "Of course I did. I am an engineer. I do things by the book." "Good. Then they have no legal standing to demand you share it or modify it or turn it off. However, HOAs can sometimes make life difficult even when they are wrong. My advice is to go to the meeting, clearly state your position, and document everything. If they try to fine you or take any action, we can fight it." That is what I was afraid you would say. "Look, Keith, you are in the right here. Just stand your firm and do not let Patricia bully you into anything. And for the love of God, record the meeting if Colorado is a one-party consent state. It is. Then record everything." Thursday evening came too quickly. I drove to the community clubhouse where HOA meetings were held, a small building near the neighborhood pool that was closed for winter. My car thermometer showed 18 degrees outside. I had my phone in my pocket, set to record audio. When I walked in, the meeting room was packed. Our HOA board consisted of Patricia as president, along with 4 other board members. Donald, an retired accountant; Susan, a real estate agent; Margaret, a dental hygienist; and Robert, who worked in IT. But it was not just the board members present. At least 30 residents were crammed into the room, sitting in folding chairs or standing along the walls. Patricia was at the front table, shuffling papers and looking very official. When she saw me, she gestured to an empty chair directly in front of the board table. "Keith, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." I sat down, feeling like I was about to be interrogated. My neighbor Tom gave me a sympathetic look from across the room. At least he seemed to understand how ridiculous this was. Patricia called the meeting to order and went through some standard business about the upcoming spring landscaping schedule and pool opening plans. Then she got to what she called new business. "As many of you know, we have a situation in our community that needs to be addressed. One of our residents, Keith Nordstrom, has installed a snow melting system that keeps his driveway and walkway completely clear while the rest of us struggle with snow removal. There were murmurs from the crowd. I could not tell if they were sympathetic or hostile. Patricia continued, "This has created what I would call an equity issue within our community. Several residents have expressed concern that this represents an unfair advantage and undermines the communal spirit of Maple Ridge. I would like to open the floor to comments." A woman I recognized as Sharon from 3 houses down stood up. "I just think it is unfair that Keith gets to have this fancy system while the rest of us are out there breaking our backs with shovels. My husband threw out his back last week shoveling our driveway." "I am sorry about your husband's back, Sharon," I said, turning in my chair to face her. "But I fail to see how my snow melting system caused that. I paid for my system with my own money. Anyone is welcome to install one if they want." "Oh, right, because we all have $40,000 just lying around," Sharon snapped. Another resident, a man named George, stood up. "I actually think Keith has a point. He improved his property with his own funds. That is not unfair, that is just being smart." "It creates visual disparity," Patricia interjected. "When potential buyers or visitors come through our neighborhood, they see one perfectly clear driveway among many snow-covered ones. It draws attention to inequality within our community. Or it draws attention to the fact that someone invested in their property," George countered. Patricia's face was getting red. "The board has discussed this situation at length, and we have come up with a proposal that we feel addresses everyone's concerns fairly." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of proposal?" Patricia pulled out a document and began reading. "The Maple Ridge HOA board proposes that Keith Nordstrom extend his snow melting system to include the main community walkways, specifically the path from the parking area to the clubhouse and the sidewalk along Maple Ridge Drive. This would provide a community benefit and justify the private system on his property." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "Do you have any idea what that would cost? Those walkways are probably 500 linear feet. That would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, not to mention the engineering challenges of routing the system that far from my house." "We understand it would be an investment," Donald, the accountant, said. "That is why we are proposing that the cost be split, with you covering 40% and the HOA covering 60% from our reserve funds. You want me to pay 40% of hundreds of thousands of dollars because you think it is unfair that I paid to improve my own property." "We think it is a reasonable compromise," Patricia said. "It is insane. I am not doing it." Patricia leaned forward. "Keith, the alternative is that we would need to consider whether your system violates the community standards outlined in our HOA agreement. Specifically, the section about maintaining visual harmony within the neighborhood. My clear driveway violates visual harmony. Are you listening to yourself? I am trying to find a solution that works for everyone. No, you are trying to punish me for making a smart investment in my property." "This is harassment, Patricia." The room erupted in cross-talk, with some people supporting me and others siding with Patricia. Susan, the real estate agent on the board, raised her hand to quiet everyone down. "Look, I think we are getting off track here. Keith is right that he has the right to improve his property. But I also understand the concerns that this creates some tension in the community. What if we approach this differently? Keith, would you be willing to at least give a presentation to interested residents about how the system works and what it costs? Maybe that would help people understand it better and reduce some of the resentment." That actually seemed reasonable. I would be happy to do that. I am not trying to be secretive about it. I just do not want to be forced to pay for community improvements that I had nothing to do with creating the need for. Patricia was not happy with this compromise, I could tell. Fine. Keith will give a presentation at next month's meeting. But in the meantime, we need to discuss the equity issue further. I am proposing that the board consider requiring Keith to either extend his system to community areas or turn it off during snow events so that the visual disparity is not so stark. You want me to turn off my system so that my driveway will be covered in snow like everyone else's. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. It is about fairness, Keith. No, it is about you wanting control over something that is none of your business. Margaret, the dental hygienist, spoke up for the first time. Patricia, I think you are overreaching here. We cannot force Keith to turn off a system on his own property just because other people are jealous. That is not what HOAs are supposed to do. I disagree, Patricia said coldly. HOAs exist to maintain community standards and ensure equitable treatment of all residents. This situation undermines both of those goals. I am leaving, I said, standing up. You have no authority to make me turn off my system or to force me to extend it. If you try to fine me or take any action against me, I will fight it with every legal resource I have. And for the record, I have been recording this entire meeting, which is perfectly legal in Colorado, so every word you have said is documented. Patricia's face went white, then red. You recorded this meeting without our consent. I recorded a meeting on HOA business, which as a homeowner I have every right to do. Colorado is a one-party consent state, Patricia. You might want to brush up on your legal knowledge before you threaten residents. I walked out of the clubhouse into the freezing night. My hands were shaking, partially from anger and partially from adrenaline. I sat in my car for a few minutes, letting the heater warm up, and reviewed the recording on my phone. It had captured everything clearly. When I got home, I immediately emailed the recording to Marcus along with a detailed summary of what had happened. He responded within an hour. Keith, this is gold. Patricia basically threatened you with baseless violations if you did not comply with an unreasonable demand. If they try anything, we have clear evidence of harassment and overreach. Keep documenting everything. And whatever you do, do not let them bully you into turning off your system. The next morning, I woke up to find a letter taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, signed by Patricia, informing me that the board had voted to impose a temporary assessment of $500 per month on my property to offset the community impact of my snow melting system. The letter cited Section 18, Paragraph 9 of the HOA agreement, which allowed for special assessments when individual homeowner actions create additional burden or expense for the community. I took pictures of the letter and immediately forwarded them to Marcus. Then I sat down and actually read Section 18, Paragraph 9 in detail. The section did allow for special assessments, but only in cases where a homeowner's actions directly created measurable costs for the HOA. The examples given were things like failing to maintain landscaping that then required HOA intervention, or causing damage to community property that needed repair. My snow melting system had not created any costs for the HOA. If anything, it reduced costs because my driveway was always clear and never contributed to ice or drainage issues. This assessment was pure retaliation. Marcus called me an hour later. Keith, this is getting ridiculous. They cannot impose an assessment like this. It has no legal basis. I am going to draft a response letter making it very clear that you will not be paying this assessment and that if they continue this harassment, you will pursue legal action. Do it. I am done playing nice. I would also recommend that you consider filing a complaint with the Colorado HOA Information Office. This is exactly the kind of abusive HOA behavior they are supposed to address. Over the next week, things escalated. Patricia sent me 3 more letters, each one threatening different consequences if I did not pay the assessment. She threatened to place a lien on my property. She threatened to revoke my access to community amenities like the pool and clubhouse. She even threatened to report me to the county for unpermitted modifications to my property, which was absurd because I had all the proper permits. Marcus sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA, clearly outlining that their actions constituted harassment and that the assessment had no legal basis. He also filed a formal complaint with the Colorado HOA Information Office on my behalf, but Patricia was not deterred. At the March HOA meeting, which I did not attend because I was fed up with the whole situation, she apparently gave a presentation about resource sharing in community settings and got the board to pass a motion requiring me to submit detailed plans and cost estimates for extending my snow melting system to community areas. When I received that letter, I called Marcus again. They are not stopping. What do I do? Ignore them. You have no obligation to provide those plans or estimates. They are trying to wear you down. Just keep living your life and let me handle the legal side. That is when I got what I thought was a brilliant and petty idea. If Patricia wanted to make an issue out of my snow melting system, I would give her exactly what she was asking for. I would turn it off, not entirely, of course. I would keep it running under my driveway, which was clearly within my property boundaries. But the system also extended under my front walkway, which technically went from my driveway to my front door, but was very close to the sidewalk that separated my property from the HOA-maintained street easement. What Patricia did not know, because she was too busy harassing me to understand how the system actually worked, was that the heated glycol solution that ran under my walkway also created a thermal effect on the ground around it. Essentially, the warmth radiating from my walkway kept the immediate area near it slightly warmer than the surrounding ground. When snow fell and melted on my walkway, it would often run off toward the sidewalk. But because my walkway was heated, that runoff would not immediately freeze. It would drain away harmlessly. If I turned off the portion of the system that heated the walkway, the snow would accumulate on it just like it did on everyone else's walkways. But more importantly, without that thermal buffer, the melting snow from my heated driveway would run toward the walkway and sidewalk and freeze there, creating a sheet of ice right at the boundary between my property and the HOA's. It was petty. It was absolutely petty. But I was done being harassed. I went down to my mechanical room, where the controls for the snow melting system were located. The system had separate zones that could be controlled independently. Zone 1 was the driveway. Zone 2 was the walkway. I turned off Zone 2. 2 days later, we got another snowstorm. 4 inches fell overnight, and I woke up to see my driveway perfectly clear, just like always. But my walkway was covered in snow. And more importantly, there was a slick, gleaming sheet of ice covering the sidewalk right in front of my house where the melting snow from my driveway had run off and frozen. I bundled up and went outside with a snow shovel. I carefully cleared the snow from my walkway, making sure to push it onto my lawn and not onto the icy sidewalk. Then I went back inside and watched. Around 9 in the morning, Patricia came walking down the street, probably doing her usual inspection of the neighborhood. I watched her approach my house, and I saw the exact moment when she stepped onto the ice sheet. Her feet went out from under her, and she landed hard on her back. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside. As much as I disliked Patricia, I was not going to leave her lying on the ice. By the time I got to her, she was already trying to sit up, looking dazed and angry. "Are you okay? That was a nasty fall," she glared at me. "Your driveway created this ice. This is your fault." "Actually, Patricia, that ice is on the public sidewalk, which is maintained by the HOA. Maybe you should talk to whoever is responsible for sidewalk safety. Your melting snow caused this ice to form. My driveway is clear, as it always is. But as you insisted, I turned off the portion of my system that heated my walkway to address your concerns about unfair advantage. Now my walkway is covered in snow like everyone else's. The ice on the sidewalk is not my problem." I could see her mind working, trying to find some angle to blame me. "You deliberately created a hazard. I turned off part of my system, just like you wanted. What happens on HOA-maintained property is not my responsibility. Can you stand? Do you need me to call someone?" She struggled to her feet, wincing. "I am fine, but you have not heard the last of this, Keith." "I am sure I have not, Patricia." She limped away down the street, trying to maintain her dignity. I went back inside and immediately called Marcus. "You are not going to believe what just happened." I told him about turning off the walkway heating and Patricia's fall. He was quiet for a moment. "Keith, I need you to be very careful here. I understand the temptation to be petty, but if someone gets seriously hurt on that ice and they can prove you created the condition intentionally, you could be liable. The ice is on HOA property, not mine." "Yes, but if they can argue that you knew your system created runoff and you deliberately modified the system to cause ice formation, that is a problem. I am not saying you are wrong, I am just saying be careful." "Understood." "But Marcus, I am not going to let Patricia bully me into keeping my system running in a configuration I do not want just to prevent ice on property that is not mine. That is exactly what she wants." "I know. Just document everything. Take pictures of the ice, pictures of where your property ends and HOA property begins, everything." I spent the rest of that day taking detailed photographs. I measured the exact distance from my driveway edge to where the ice sheet began. I took photos showing that the ice was clearly on the sidewalk, which was in the HOA-maintained easement according to the plat map for our subdivision. I documented everything. The next day, I received a notice from the HOA stating that I was being fined $1,000 for creating a safety hazard on community property. The notice claimed that my snow melting system was causing dangerous ice formations on the public sidewalk, and that I was required to either modify the system to prevent runoff or pay for daily ice removal service for the affected area. Marcus filed an immediate response denying any liability and pointing out that the HOA could not fine me for conditions on property that I did not own or maintain. He also reiterated that I had actually turned off a portion of my system at their implied request, and that any ice formation was due to natural snowmelt and drainage patterns, not anything I had deliberately caused. But Patricia was relentless. She sent out an email to the entire neighborhood warning residents about the dangerous ice hazard at the Nordstrom property and advising them to use alternative routes. She placed orange safety cones on the sidewalk in front of my house. She even contacted the county about the supposed hazard. A county inspector showed up at my door 3 days later. He was a middle-aged guy named Carl who looked like he had seen it all and was tired of HOA drama. "Mr. Nordstrom, I am Carl Peters from Boulder County Code Enforcement. I received a complaint about ice conditions on the sidewalk in front of your property. Come on in, Carl. I have been expecting something like this." I showed him my documentation, including the photos, measurements, and my property survey. I explained the entire situation with Patricia and the HOA, including the harassment about my snow melting system. Carl looked over everything carefully. Okay, so let me make sure I understand. You installed a permitted snow melting system on your property. The HOA harassed you about it and demanded you share it with the community. You turned off the part that heated your walkway, which is entirely within your rights. The snowmelt from your driveway drains toward the street, which is normal and legal. Some of that melt has been freezing on the public sidewalk in cold weather, which is also normal and happens all over the county. That is exactly right. And the HOA president wants me to cite you for a hazard that is on HOA-maintained property. Apparently. Carl shook his head. Mr. Nordstrom, I am going to level with you. Patricia Henderson has filed at least 20 complaints with our office in the past 2 years about various residents in Maple Ridge. Most of them are baseless. This one is no different. You are not responsible for ice that forms on public sidewalks due to natural drainage and weather conditions. The HOA is responsible for maintaining that sidewalk, including ice removal during winter. You have not violated any code, and you are not going to receive any citation. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate you actually looking at the facts. No problem, and off the record. Your snow melting system is pretty impressive. I wish I had one. After Carl left, I sent Marcus an update. He was pleased but cautioned me that Patricia would probably try something else. He was right. The following week, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing the HOA. The letter stated that I was in violation of multiple sections of the HOA agreement, and that if I did not comply with their demands within 30 days, they would file a lawsuit seeking injunctive relief and monetary damages. The demands were absurd. They wanted me to turn my system back on and keep it running at all times during winter weather. They wanted me to extend the system to heat the sidewalk in front of my house. They wanted me to pay all past assessments and fines, which now totaled over $3,000. And they wanted me to pay for the HOA's legal fees in pursuing this matter. Marcus reviewed the letter and laughed. Keith, this is a baseless intimidation tactic. Their attorney has to know this will not hold up in court. Let me respond and make it clear that we are prepared to countersue for harassment if they continue down this path. But while Marcus was drafting his response, something unexpected happened. I got a call from my neighbor Tom. Keith, you need to know something. I was at the HOA board meeting last night, and things got heated. Margaret, the board member who defended you before, resigned. She said she could not be part of an organization that harasses homeowners, and she said some other things about Patricia that I think you should know about. What kind of things? She said that Patricia has been using HOA funds for personal expenses. She said there are receipts for things like spa days and expensive dinners that Patricia claimed were HOA business, but definitely were not. Margaret said she tried to raise concerns about it, but Patricia shut her down. Margaret finally had enough and resigned, but she said she is going to file a formal complaint with the state. Are you serious? Dead serious. And Keith, there is more. Patricia apparently told the board that if you do not comply with their demands, she is going to start filing complaints against other residents who have made improvements to their properties. She is trying to create a pattern of enforcement that she can use to justify going after you. That is insane. I know, but I wanted you to know what you are dealing with. This is not just about your snow melting system anymore. Patricia is on some kind of power trip and she is not going to stop. I immediately called Marcus and relayed what Tom had told me. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, Keith, this changes things. If Patricia is misusing HOA funds, that is embezzlement. And if she is threatening to selectively enforce HOA rules as retaliation, that is even more evidence of abuse of authority. I think we need to go on the offensive here. What do you have in mind? I am going to file a motion in district court seeking a restraining order against the HOA to prevent them from taking any enforcement action against you while we investigate these allegations. And I am going to request a forensic audit of the HOA's finances. If Patricia has been stealing, we are going to expose it. Is not that extreme? Keith, Patricia has been harassing you for months over a legal improvement to your property. She has imposed baseless fines, threatened your property with liens, and is now threatening legal action. She has made your life hell because you installed a snow melting system. If she is also stealing from the HOA, then every homeowner in Maple Ridge deserves to know. This is not just about you anymore. Marcus filed the motion the next day. The court scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I had to live with the ongoing harassment from Patricia. She sent me daily emails about various supposed violations, everything from my trash cans being visible from the street for 30 minutes too long to a small patch of dead grass in my lawn that apparently violated landscaping standards. I documented every email, every phone call, every letter. Marcus was building a comprehensive case showing a pattern of harassment and abuse of authority. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in Boulder County District Court. Patricia showed up with the HOA's attorney, a guy named Richard who looked uncomfortable with the entire situation. Marcus and I sat on the other side of the courtroom. There were also several other residents from Maple Ridge who had come to observe, including Tom, George, and Margaret. The judge was a woman named Judge Helen Carstairs, who had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She reviewed the motion and the supporting documents quickly, then looked up at both parties. Counselors, this appears to be a dispute between a homeowner and his HOA regarding a snow melting system. Mr. Nash, you are representing Mr. Nordstrom and seeking a restraining order against the HOA. Can you summarize your position? Marcus stood. Your Honor, this case involves systematic harassment of my client by the HOA president, Patricia Henderson. Mr. Nordstrom installed a legal, permitted snow melting system on his property using his own funds. Since then, Miss Henderson has imposed baseless fines, threatened liens, demanded that my client either share the system with the community or turn it off, and has now threatened legal action. We have documentation showing that Miss Henderson has also misused her position to retaliate against my client and possibly other residents. We are seeking a restraining order to prevent further harassment while we investigate allegations of financial misconduct by Miss Henderson. Judge Carstairs looked at Richard, the HOA's attorney. Mr. Davis, what is your response? Richard stood, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. Your Honor, the HOA's position is that Mr. Nordstrom's snow melting system creates equity concerns within the community, and that the HOA has the authority to address those concerns through its governing documents. The fines and assessments were imposed in accordance with the HOA's rules and regulations. Has Mr. Nordstrom violated any specific rule or regulation? The HOA believes that his system creates visual disparity and may pose safety concerns due to ice runoff. Visual disparity is not a code violation, Mr. Davis, and the county inspector has already determined that there are no safety violations related to the system. So what specific rule has Mr. Nordstrom violated? Richard hesitated. Your Honor, the HOA agreement includes provisions about maintaining community standards and visual harmony. Those are vague terms that cannot be used to impose specific penalties without clear guidelines. Does the HOA agreement specifically prohibit snow melting systems? No, Your Honor, but does it prohibit home improvements generally? No, but it requires that improvements maintain community standards. And by what objective measure has Mr. Nordstrom's snow melting system failed to maintain community standards? It keeps his property clear of snow and ice, which sounds like excellent property maintenance to me. I had to suppress a smile. Judge Carstairs was not buying the HOA's arguments at all. She continued, "Mr. Davis, I have reviewed the documentation submitted by Mr. Nash. It shows a pattern of escalating demands and threats by Miss Henderson that appear to be retaliatory in nature. It also includes allegations of financial misconduct. Are you aware of these allegations? Your Honor, I only represent the HOA on this specific matter. I am not aware of any financial misconduct. Perhaps you should become aware before you continue representing them. Miss Henderson, you are present in the courtroom. Do you wish to address the court?" Patricia stood up, her face red. "Your Honor, I am simply doing my job as HOA president. Mr. Nordstrom's system creates problems for the community, and I have been trying to resolve those problems in accordance with our governing documents. What specific problems does his system create? It creates resentment among residents who do not have similar systems. It creates visual disparity, and it creates ice hazards on public sidewalks. The county inspector has determined there are no hazardous code violations. Resentment is not a legal basis for imposing fines. And visual disparity is a subjective standard that cannot justify the level of penalties you have imposed. Miss Henderson, it appears to me that you have been using your position to harass Mr. Nordstrom because you personally disapprove of his home improvement. That is not appropriate use of HOA authority. Your Honor, I object to that characterization. Your objection is noted. However, based on the evidence presented, I am going to grant Mr. Nordstrom's motion for a temporary restraining order. The HOA is hereby prohibited from taking any enforcement action against Mr. Nordstrom related to his snow melting system, pending a full hearing on this matter. Additionally, I am ordering a forensic audit of the HOA's finances to investigate the allegations of misconduct raised by Mr. Nash. The audit will be conducted by an independent firm selected by the court, and the costs will be split between the parties pending the outcome of the investigation." Patricia looked like she had been slapped. "Your Honor, that is completely unnecessary. Our finances are properly managed." "Then the audit will confirm that, and you will have nothing to worry about. We will reconvene in 60 days for a full hearing after the audit is complete. This hearing is adjourned." As we left the courtroom, Marcus looked pleased. "That went better than I expected." Judge Carstairs clearly saw through Patricia's nonsense. "What happens now? Now we wait for the audit. If they find what I think they are going to find, Patricia is going to have much bigger problems than your snow melting system." Over the next 6 weeks, the forensic auditors went through the HOA's financial records with a fine-toothed comb. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia was panicking, holding emergency board meetings and trying to get the remaining board members to refuse to cooperate with the audit. But the court order left them no choice. During this time, I received no further harassment from the HOA. The restraining order had done its job. I kept my snow melting system running on both my driveway and walkway, and I enjoyed the peace and quiet. Then, about a week before the scheduled follow-up hearing, I got a call from Marcus that I was not expecting. "Keith, the audit report came back. You need to sit down for this." "What did they find?" "Patricia has been embezzling from the HOA for at least 3 years. The auditors found over $80,000 in fraudulent expenses, fake invoices, and direct transfers to her personal accounts. She has been using HOA credit cards for personal purchases, billing the HOA for services that were never performed, and even creating fake vendor accounts that routed payments to her own bank accounts. Oh my God, it gets worse. The auditors also found that she has been selectively enforcing HOA rules against residents who questioned her authority or her spending. You were not the only one she was harassing, Keith. There are at least 6 other homeowners who she went after for various supposed violations after they raised concerns about HOA finances or her management. So what happens now? The auditors have referred their findings to the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. Patricia is going to be charged with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of authority, and the civil case is going to go very much in your favor. The follow-up hearing was 2 weeks later. When I arrived at the courtroom with Marcus, I was surprised to see that it was even more packed than the first hearing. Word had spread through Maple Ridge about the audit findings, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up. Patricia was not present. According to Richard, the HOA's attorney, she had resigned as HOA president and was refusing to participate in the proceedings on advice of her criminal defense attorney. Judge Carstairs reviewed the audit report with a grim expression. Then she addressed the courtroom. This court has reviewed the forensic audit of the Maple Ridge HOA finances. The findings are deeply troubling. Miss Patricia Henderson, who served as HOA president, systematically defrauded the organization and its members of over $80,000. She also abused her authority to retaliate against homeowners who questioned her actions or who she perceived as threats to her control. She turned to me. "Mr. Nordstrom, you were one of those homeowners. The evidence shows that Miss Henderson targeted you specifically because your snow melting system drew attention from other residents, and she feared that this attention would lead to greater scrutiny of her activities. The fines, assessments, and threats she directed at you had no legitimate basis. They were purely retaliatory." The judge continued. "I am issuing a permanent injunction prohibiting the Maple Ridge HOA from taking any enforcement action against Mr. Nordstrom related to his snow melting system or any other legal home improvement. I am also ordering the HOA to refund any fines or assessments paid by Mr. Nordstrom and to pay his legal fees and costs. Finally, I am ordering the HOA to implement financial controls and oversight mechanisms to prevent future misconduct." Richard stood. "Your Honor, the HOA accepts these orders and apologizes to Mr. Nordstrom for the harassment he endured. The remaining board members were not aware of Miss Henderson's misconduct and are committed to reforming the organization. See that you do, Mr. Davis. As for Miss Henderson, the district attorney's office will be pursuing criminal charges. This court's role is limited to the civil matter, but I want it clearly stated that Miss Henderson's actions were not only improper but criminal. This case is closed." The courtroom erupted in applause. Several of my neighbors came up to shake my hand and thank me for standing up to Patricia. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it, man. You took her down." "I just wanted to keep my snow melting system," I said with a laugh. "I never intended to expose an embezzlement scheme." "Well, you did everyone a favor. Patricia has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. Now we can actually live in peace." Marcus and I went out for lunch to celebrate. He raised his glass of iced tea. "To standing your ground and not letting bullies win. To good attorneys who know how to fight back," I countered. "So what are you going to do now? Enjoy your perfectly clear driveway in peace." "Actually, I have been thinking about that presentation I promised to give about how the snow melting system works." A bunch of neighbors have asked me about it. I think I will put together something educational. Maybe some of them will decide to install their own systems. That would drive Patricia crazy if she knew. Good thing she is going to be too busy dealing with criminal charges to care. 3 months later, Patricia Henderson pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of authority. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. The judge in the criminal case made it clear that abusing a position of trust in a community organization was a serious offense that warranted significant consequences. The Maple Ridge HOA underwent major reforms. A new board was elected, including Margaret, who came back after Patricia's departure. They implemented financial transparency measures, hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations, and revised the HOA agreement to clarify rules and limit the authority of board members to impose arbitrary penalties. I gave my presentation about snow melting systems at a community meeting that spring. About 20 residents attended, and several of them ended up installing their own systems over the following year. The subdivision became known in Boulder for having the clearest driveways in winter, which actually increased property values. Tom installed a system the following fall. When the first snow of the season came in November, I looked out my window to see both our driveways perfectly clear while the rest of the street was covered in white. Tom texted me a photo with the caption, "Best investment ever. Thanks for fighting the good fight." I responded, "Enjoy never shoveling again. You earned it." Life in Maple Ridge settled into a peaceful routine. The new HOA board focused on actual community improvements like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, rather than harassing residents over legal home improvements. Property values increased. People were happier. I occasionally thought about Patricia and the whole ordeal. It seemed almost surreal that a simple home improvement had uncovered such widespread corruption and abuse. But I was glad I had stood my ground. If I had given in to her demands, if I had paid those baseless fines or agreed to extend my system at my own expense, Patricia would have continued her reign of terror over the neighborhood. My stubbornness had accidentally freed everyone from her control. One evening in December, about a year after the court hearings, I was sitting in my living room watching the snow fall outside. My driveway was clear, as always. My walkway was clear. The ice that had caused Patricia to fall that day so long ago was just a memory. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hey, just saw that Patricia was released on parole, served 1 year of her 2-year sentence for good behavior. Thought you should know." I looked out at my clear driveway and smiled. Patricia was out of prison, but she was also out of power. She had lost her position, her reputation, and her freedom because she could not stand the fact that someone had invested in improving their own property. The irony was not lost on me. I texted back, "Thanks for letting me know. I hope she learned something from all this." Probably not. People like that rarely change, but at least she can't hurt anyone in your neighborhood anymore. He was right. Whatever Patricia did with the rest of her life was not my concern. I had my house, my perfectly functioning snow melting system, and a neighborhood full of people who had learned the importance of standing up to abuse of authority. I turned on my outdoor lights and watched the snow continue to fall. By morning, my driveway would be clear while many others would be covered. But now, several of my neighbors would also have clear driveways. And more importantly, no one would be harassed about it. The whole experience had taught me something valuable. HOAs can serve important purposes in maintaining communities and property values. But they can also become vehicles for petty tyrants who care more about control than actual community welfare. It is important to know your rights, document everything, and be willing to fight back when those rights are violated. I never regretted installing my snow melting system. I never regretted standing up to Patricia. And I definitely never regretted turning off that walkway heating when she demanded I share my system with the community. That petty act of defiance had inadvertently exposed her corruption and freed an entire neighborhood from her harassment. Sometimes being petty has its benefits, especially when you are in the right. As winter deepened and more snow fell on Boulder, I continued to enjoy my investment. The system ran flawlessly, keeping my property clear through storm after storm. Several more neighbors installed their own systems based on my recommendations, and I even started consulting with a few local businesses about installing similar systems in their parking lots. The final chapter of the whole saga came that spring. The Maple Ridge HOA held their annual meeting in April, and I attended to see how things were going under the new leadership. Margaret, now serving as HOA president, gave a report on the state of the organization. I want to start by thanking everyone for their patience and support as we have worked to rebuild trust in this organization, she began. The past year has been difficult, but we have made significant progress. Our finances are now transparent and regularly audited. We have clear, objective standards for enforcement that apply equally to all residents, and we have focused on actual community improvements rather than petty disputes. She gestured to me. I also want to specifically acknowledge Keith Nordstrom, who had the courage to stand up to abuse of authority when many of us were too intimidated to speak up. Keith, your fight for your right to improve your own property ultimately exposed serious misconduct that was hurting all of us. Thank you. The room broke into applause, and I felt genuinely moved. I had not set out to be any kind of hero. I had just wanted to keep my snow melting system. But sometimes doing the right thing for yourself ends up helping everyone. That evening, as I drove home from the meeting, I reflected on everything that had happened. A year and a half ago, I had been sitting in my home office watching Patricia stare at my clear driveway with envy and resentment. That single moment had set off a chain of events that led to harassment, legal battles, criminal investigations, and ultimately justice. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at my house. It was a nice house in a nice neighborhood. I had made it better with my snow melting system, and I had made the neighborhood better by refusing to be bullied. My phone buzzed one more time. It was a group text from Tom to several neighbors who had installed snow melting systems. First neighborhood BBQ of the season this Saturday. Let's celebrate surviving winter without shoveling. I smiled and responded, I will bring burgers. As I walked up my perfectly maintained walkway to my front door, I felt satisfied, not just because I had won my fight with the HOA, but because I had stood up for a principle that mattered. Homeowners have the right to improve their properties within legal bounds without being harassed by power-hungry HOA board members. Communities should encourage improvement and investment, not punish it. And most importantly, when someone tries to bully you into submission, sometimes the best response is to stand your ground, document everything, and let their own misconduct be their downfall. My snow melting system continued to run perfectly, keeping my driveway and walkway clear through many more Colorado winters. Every time I looked out at that clear concrete while snow fell around it, I remembered the battle I had fought and won. Not just for myself, but for every homeowner who has ever been harassed by an HOA board member on a power trip. Patricia Henderson learned a hard lesson about the consequences of abusing authority and breaking the law. The Maple Ridge community learned the importance of oversight and accountability in community governance. And I learned that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can lead to the biggest victories. My advice to anyone facing similar HOA harassment: know your rights, document everything, get a good attorney, and do not back down when you are in the right. The truth has a way of coming out, and justice has a way of prevailing, even when it takes longer than you would like. And if you live in Colorado or any other place with serious winter weather, consider installing a snow melting system. It is expensive, but it is worth every penny to never shovel snow again. Just be prepared for your HOA president to potentially lose their mind over it. Though hopefully your HOA president is not also embezzling $80,000, because that is a whole other level of drama that I would not wish on anyone. The end of my story is simple. I still live in my house in Maple Ridge. I still have my snow melting system. The HOA leaves me alone. And every winter when the first snow falls, I make a cup of coffee, sit by my window, and watch my driveway stay perfectly clear while nature does its thing all around it. It is a small victory, but it is mine. And after everything I went through to keep it, I savor that victory every single day.